Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. My name is Nadia Sands. This, of course, is Learn How to Edit Stuff, and today we're talking about After Effects. What specifically in After Effects? Well, a bunch of stuff, really, mostly things to speed up your workflow. I get comments on my videos all the time. I get messages from you guys all the time. Hey, how did you do that one little thing with the keyframes? Hey, my render preview doesn't look right. What can I do? Okay, we're gonna cover a lot of stuff today. I have 25 things written down that I wanna show you guys in this video. We're gonna move through some of them very quickly. We're gonna take a little bit of time on others. They'll probably be more than 25, but hopefully at the end of this video, you will have a good sense of how to speed up your workflow and how to make life easier for you while working in After Effects. Whether you're just starting out or you've been doing it for a little while, there should be something in here that can help you out today. All right, let's just jump into it. Open up Adobe After Effects. We're getting started. All right, guys, After Effects is open, and first things first, we have to start ourselves a new composition. So when you open up After Effects, you'll see something that looks like this. You can just click on this new composition button and it will open up the composition settings dialog box. Now, there are a couple different things to note here. Number one is the dimensions of your project. Right now we're working in 1080. The frame rate is 23976 and the duration is 10 seconds long. So whatever you guys are doing, whatever you guys are working with, this is kind of where your main settings will be. Now, if we pop right over here to the advanced tab, make sure that preserve resolution when nested is turned off. If you turn down your resolution of a timeline to like 1/8 or 1/16, and then you nest that composition into a full resolution comp, the nest is still gonna stay at 1/16 resolution. So that little checkbox right there might save you a whole lot of time and frustration if you don't know what's happening with the resolution of your composition. Right underneath that, we have the motion blur for your composition. This is kind of important. If you want a little bit more motion blur, crank this up from 180 to 360, and that will give you significantly more motion blur, but we're not really gonna cover all of that today. And of course, the 3D renderer, the classic 3D After Effects renderer is what you're gonna wanna do. If you're working with more extruded 3D layers or things like that, you can turn it on Cinema 4D, which is a little bit more powerful, but we're not gonna go into that today. What we are gonna do is just click OK. That rhymed, by the way. All right, let's come on up here to Edit and go to Preferences, General, and we're gonna take a look at the After Effects menu and a couple different things that I think you guys should be aware of. We're gonna work from the top down, starting with General. This menu setting right here, default spatial interpolation to linear. If you have that unchecked, any sort of keyframe animations that you do are going to automatically have a Bezier curve applied to them, which can get really frustrating. You don't know why you can't get angular movements. You're really confused. This is why. So make sure that this is checked. Default spatial interpolation to linear. And the other thing to note in the general preferences is center anchor point in new shape layers. Basically what that will do is if you create a new shape layer, it will put the anchor point directly in the center. So if you do any sort of rotation animation, it'll always rotate from the center of the shape layer. If that isn't unchecked, it will put it to the center of the composition. And if you make your shape layer up to the left, your anchor point will be in a way. It's just gonna, this saves you time. These are all time-saving little functionality. Okay, just make sure it's checked, come on. And of course, for that satisfaction when you finish a project, make sure play sound when render finishes. It makes that nice little sound, you know, we all like hearing that sound. All right, moving down to previews. One nice little time-saving thing is the composition switches automatically enable frame blending and motion blur rendering. And basically what this will do is if you turn on motion blur on your layer, it will automatically turn on motion blur for your composition. It just saves you one more click. It saves you from possibly forgetting about turning it on, and then you're like, why is my motion blur not working? And then you're trying to like deconstruct. Okay, this just saves a lot of time. So click that little checkbox. Display, nothing really to mention here, but you guys can look at my settings and see if you want to match any of them. Moving down now to import. The still footage length is something I go back and forth on all the time. If length of composition is turned on and you drag a still image into your project, let's just do that real quick. If you drag it down onto your timeline, it will automatically make that still image the entire duration of your composition, which is 10 seconds. Now this is useful if you happen to be working over here or something and then you drag and drop something onto your timeline, it'll automatically show up, right? Because you're down over here in the end of your composition. Now, if we go back to the menu settings and we turn this to 1 second, now when you drag something onto your timeline, it will just make it 1 second long, which is great if you only want to work in small chunks. But again, if you're down here at 7 seconds and you drag and drop this down here, you're not going to see it right away because it automatically defaults to the beginning of your composition when you drag it straight to the timeline. But what I could always do is just drag and drop this over near my playhead just like that. And now that 1 second chunk will appear exactly where I need it. It's just one of those things that you have to pay attention to. Again, I go back and forth on it all the time. I tend to leave composition length on because then I can just cut my layer and just keep moving forward. It makes it a little bit more easy for me to understand. For your video footage, also enable hardware accelerated decoding. You have to restart your computer in After Effects for that to take place, but definitely do that. Output, nothing crazy happening here. Grids and guides. Guys, make your grid lines and guidelines a very loud color. A lot of people will leave them like light blue or green or something that blends in with the footage or graphics or whatever they're using. Make them very loud so you can distinguish them from the rest of your composition. That's just it's a tip from me to you. It's just... Labels, you guys can do whatever you want with labels, media, and disk cache. Guys, set your disk cache size as high as you need it to be. If you have a dedicated drive on your computer like I do, I have a dedicated cache drive that everything just goes to that drive. It just helps things speed up. It helps you keep working because you have a dedicated drive just for those cache files, and you don't have to worry about your computer hard drive running out of space or anything like that. This is a little bit more of a nerdy post-production editor thing. If you guys can't afford or don't have the space for a dedicated cache drive, just put it somewhere on your computer where you know it's easily accessible, and make sure that your computer doesn't run out of hard drive space. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues where After Effects isn't actually hitting its cache. You won't be able to preview your timeline, and then you're going to start to get really frustrated and run into a bunch of unknown issues, usually which can be solved by emptying the cache. So, every couple weeks, empty that cache out. Just do it. Video preview, I have Mercury Transmit disabled because I'm not transmitting to an extra monitor. I'm only working on this monitor here, so enable Mercury Transmit. That will help you out a little bit with CPU usage. Appearance, all you people that use After Effects like this, you are absolute psychopaths. Make it dark mode, come on. New project, we're not loading any template. Auto saves, everyone. This is an important tab. Mine is saving every 4 minutes for a maximum of 400 versions, because if After Effects decides to crash and you've been working for 25 minutes and didn't save, you are in such a bad mood at that point. So if you keep your saves very short in time and you keep them a very large number, you are pretty much guaranteeing that you're never gonna lose that much work. Losing 4 minutes of work for me is not that big of a deal. Losing 30 minutes of work for me, I'm just going to bed. Memory, crank this all the way down to the lowest number that you can go. I think the lowest you can go is 3, so I have 32 gigs of RAM in my computer. Other applications are able to use 3 of it, which means that I can use 28.9 gigs of RAM for After Effects or any other Adobe product. So make sure that you are allocating as much RAM to After Effects as you can. Audio hardware, nothing going on here. Audio output mapping, nothing going on here. Sync settings, nothing going on here. Wait. Nope, nothing going on here. Type, nothing going on here. And scripting and expressions. This is a whole nother video topic, by the way. So we are good to go on the menu options. And if you followed my instructions for the menu portion of this After Effects video, hopefully by the end of this, after we learn everything, your workflow will speed up tremendously and things will work just a little bit nicer for you. Now we're gonna move on to the biggest time-saving functionality that you could possibly have with any program, especially After Effects, is setting your own custom hotkeys. I can't tell you how many people use the default After Effects shortcuts. Like, don't do that. Set your own custom shortcuts that are much faster and much easier for you to remember, and then it'll allow you to work a little bit faster. So let's jump into the keyboard shortcuts menu by coming up to Edit and going to Keyboard Shortcuts. And guys, what we're gonna do, Scale Key. All right, whatever you have your shortcut set to, which I believe the default is Shift-Control-S to add a scale keyframe, delete that garbage right now. Just click in where it says shortcut and hit Alt-S. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna set all of our most used keyframe animations to Alt plus a modifier. So scale will be S, P will be position, R will be rotation, and T will be transparency. And I have Alt-C set to center anchor point in whatever I'm working with, okay? That is one of the most commonly used shortcuts that I have. You make something, you add something, you want to center the anchor point immediately in that image or graphic or shape layer or whatever it is, just so that if you do any rotation properties or anything, it's going to rotate and scale from the center of that thing. So very simple. There we go, center anchor point in layer, and make sure that yours is set to Alt-C. Now, I'm not saying that the Alt modifier is the exact right way to do this, but it is the way that I decided to do it because it's really simple to understand. S scale, P position, R rotation, T transparency, and C center. That's easy, and it's just Alt. That's all you gotta do. No Alt Shift, no Alt Control Shift, no Alt Control. Gotta hit the elbow on one side of the keyboard to hit, no. Just make it simple and work faster. That's the whole point of this video. Great, now that you guys have set your keyboard shortcuts, one very quick thing that I can teach you guys that most people don't know how to do for some reason is how to rename anything in After Effects. All you gotta do is click on the layer, hit enter, and now you can rename it. I'm gonna rename that to rename, and I'm gonna rename this to Apple Pick, boom. And I've renamed my layer simply by clicking and hitting enter, and then you can rename it and then hit enter again once you're finished. Also, guys, right down here, this little target looking crosshair box thing right here, if you click on that, there are a couple different options that I use literally all the time, which is title and action safe and proportional grid. The proportional grid will add, yes, you guessed it, a proportional grid to your composition that you can now line things up with and make sure that things are centered or things that are lined up with each other above at the top. This is very useful to everyone, including myself. What most people will do is they will actually not add the proportional grid, they will add just a regular grid, and this is actually not proportional. You can see up here we have a full square, and if we go over here on the right hand side, there's like a portion of a square here. So what you want to do is always use the proportional grid, not just the regular grid. Just make life easier for yourself, guys. And again, nice loud grid lines right here, and if you guys hit Control R on the keyboard, you can drag from the ruler up here and you can add additional lines in your composition. I'm using red for my ruler lines and yellow for my grid lines. Nice and bold and loud colors so I can see them. They are very contrasty against my background, and I am just working and keeping everything nice and organized. And up here, the title action safe. This is just a nice way for you to gauge the center of your composition when you're working with text or anything like that. What I'll do a lot of the times is just add a grid line right down here across the center where these little hash marks are, and I will add a vertical grid line right through the center like that. Turn title action safe off, and now I just have an exact center, and it is in nice quadrants here in my timeline so I can see exactly what I'm doing. Speed up your workflow, keep things straightened out, keep it in your comp, keep it all nice. Let's move on. All right, I'm going to quickly generate a new shape layer. Come down here, I'm going to twirl this down, add an ellipse, twirl this down again, add a fill, and I'm going to increase the size of this fill. Now, guys, based on what we did with the keyframes earlier, this should be super, super simple. What I want to happen is I want my red ball to scale up over the course of 1 second. So Alt-S, there you go, super easy keyframe, go over to 1 second, and now I can just scale this up. I also want it to move over to the right. So I'm gonna go back to the very beginning, set a position keyframe, Alt-P, look at how easy that is, come over here, and now we're gonna move it over to the right. Nice, simple animation. And then after 1 second, I want it to go back to 2 seconds, and now I want to have it go back to the starting place. Now, if you guys watch this, and you kind of feel like, hey, that's a little bit slow for me, I don't really think that I like that speed, did you know that you can grab all of your keyframes down here, hold down Alt, and then click and drag, and it will uniformly scale all of the keyframes that you have in a composition, so you're not sitting here and going like this and moving this over, then going like this and moving it. What are you doing? Just grab all your keyframes, hold Alt, click and drag, and now they uniformly scale or increase depending on what you want to do with the speed. So if I want to make this whole thing 1 second instead of 2 seconds, now I just did, and it took me like literally half a second to do. Work smarter, not harder. Also, if you have all your keyframes selected and you press F9 on the keyboard, you can just make them easy ease really quickly. Check this out. Boop. Now they're all easy ease keyframes. None of this going in here and right clicking and then going to keyframe assistant and then going to, look, it says F9 right there. Right there. All you gotta do, highlight your keyframes, F9, boom, now we're cooking with gas. What does this allow me to do, Ian? We're not gonna get into it in full detail today, but I can just highlight all of my scale keyframes, come up here to the keyframe graph editor, and now I can start messing with the velocity scale of my scaling. Amazing. Check that out. Woo. Woo. If I wanted to shrink this like that. Woo. Okay, I could do this all day, I gotta stop. All right, say you've done your animation exactly how you want it. You close all these things because you want to work really neatly, and you have this thing right here and you're like, okay, I want to go back in and I want to adjust some keyframes. What do I do? Well, there's two different things that you can do. You can come right up here to this little magnifying glass thing with the layer selected and literally just type in scale, and it will show you just your scale keyframes down here. This is searchable for all properties in your timeline, which is actually insane. We're just using it for keyframes right now, but it is much more powerful than that. If you don't want to use the magnifying glass and you're even smarter and you work even faster, click on your layer and hit U on the keyboard and it will show you all animated properties for that layer, including effects. All you have to do is hit U once on the keyboard and it will bring up all your animated properties. That's the way to do it. All right, guys, resolution time. Some of you come over here and you're like, oh, this must be my resolution. I'm gonna hit quarter. Great, yeah, it turns your paused resolution into quarter, but now if you go to hit play, it will actually still play in full resolution. So you may come down here and turn this to quarter, but then go to render your timeline and it still is moving really, really slow and you wonder why. And that's because if you come right over here to the preview tab, and if you guys don't have this preview window, look, I'll even get rid of it for you. Come up here to window and then go right down here to preview, and it will put your preview window back down there. Now look at here, your preview resolution is set to full, but your timeline paused resolution is set to quarter. So if you're scrolling down here and you're going anywhere on your timeline, it's gonna be in quarter resolution. But as soon as you try to play it, it will actually play it in full res. So if you want your playback to be in quarter res, turn this to quarter. And if you want your paused resolution to be in full, do that. See, now as you can see, I'm playing it back and it's playing back in quarter resolution, but as soon as I hit spacebar to pause it, my composition goes back to full resolution. If you want them to match each other, change them both to quarter. So those of you that thought that you only had to do one dropdown for your resolution, the one right underneath your preview window is the paused resolution, or anytime you scrub through your timeline, that's the resolution it's gonna land on. So if you switch that to quarter, as you're working, it will be in quarter res, but your preview, which is what happens when you play, if it's still in full resolution, you're gonna have a long time to wait while it renders, and you may be confused as to why that's happening, and that's the reason right there. You're welcome. And right next to the resolution button down here in your preview window, come right over here to this little checker box, boop, and you can look at something as an alpha layer preview so you don't see it on black. If you guys are doing any sort of graphic or motion graphic or whatever, you can just toggle on and off the alpha transparency just so you can see what it looks like not against black. That is a very helpful little button right there. Okay, adaptive resolution versus final output. If you hover over this little lightning bolt little icon right here, it says fast previews, and if you click on that, adaptive resolution and final quality, what is the difference between the two? Adaptive resolution is exactly what it sounds like. It will adapt to a lower resolution depending on how hard your computer's working, how much After Effects has inside of it. If you've ever zoomed into anything on your timeline and it gets really pixelated for a second, and then it goes to full quality, and then you click and drag and it goes pixelated again, that's adaptive resolution. So if you always want to be working in full quality, which I recommend doing for basic motion graphics and text treatments, switch this from adaptive resolution to final quality, and you will pretty much guarantee that you will be looking at the final quality based on your resolution over here at all times. If your composition gets too big, too crazy, a lot going on, your computer will slow way down. So if you're running into computer speed issues, you may want to turn adaptive resolution back on in the meantime. Also guys, did you know that you can save your frame as any sort of file in After Effects by just coming up here to Composition, Save Frame as File, and now we're gonna click on this output module right here, and we're gonna switch this from Photoshop sequence to PNG sequence. It's actually not going to be a sequence, it is just going to be one single frame. Click OK. Where is it going? It's going to the desktop. Why not? We're working messy today. Hit render. Love that sound. And there you go guys, Comp 1, it is a red ball, and if we throw that back into our timeline right here, now, I have brought that frame back into After Effects and it is very meta. But if you do any sort of graphic motion design in After Effects, you can export that as a file, a PNG, a Photoshop sequence, a TIFF image, whatever you guys want. So if you're doing some work in After Effects and you need that as an image, just quickly export Save Frame As, and then you're off to the races. Next thing here, if you hit spacebar down in your timeline, it will play, and then you hit spacebar again, and then you hit spacebar, and it just keeps going, right? But what if you wanted to start from the beginning? What if you wanted to restart? What can you do? You can hit Shift Spacebar. Check this out. Shift Spacebar, and then I stop it. Shift spacebar. Oh, look, it's repeating because it is starting over from the beginning when the Shift key is held in as a modifier. So if I hit spacebar normally, and then I hold Shift space, it will just start repeating right from there. And this is a really nice way to just kind of rewatch a little animation that you're doing over and over again. If you don't want to set it to loop, you can just hit Shift space and just keep previewing it over and over again. This video is chock full of nuggets of gold. All right guys, I've deleted my keyframes down here on my image, and we have two more final things to show you guys. Up here under Effects and Presets, Animation Presets, under Behaviors, you have a bunch of different behaviors and a bunch of different things that you probably have no idea what they do if you haven't explored this menu before. And guys, this is really cool. If I come down here to Transitions, Movement, cool. Let's do Card Wipe 2D Fractured, and let's just drop that right on my circle layer. And now everything goes away. What happened? Well, what it did was it added a bunch of stuff in my effect controls to this shape layer. If I play this, you can see they're just kind of fractals in. And basically what it's doing is it's applying a transition to my shape layer, and I didn't have to do anything. And if I wanted to speed this up and not have it be 2 seconds long, what's the key command? U on the keyboard. That's right, you remember U. I'm gonna hit U on the keyboard and then just drag this keyframe over to 1 second, and now instead of it being 2 seconds, it is now 1 second long. So now under my effects, I'm going to delete the effect off of that circle layer, and I can literally add anything over here if I wanted to. Slide drop, cool, let's put that right there. What's it gonna do? It is going to drop the circle down, and I didn't have to do any animation whatsoever. So you can apply all of these different presets and behaviors to any layer in After Effects, and my favorite, guys, is the wiggle position behavior. If I drop that right on my layer, what that's gonna do is it's gonna give me some controls up here for the wiggle speed and the wiggle amount. Now, if I were to just play this as it is, it's just kind of floating around in space by itself, which is really nice. But a lot of you memers out there love your things to shake really aggressively and fast or whatever. So if I wanted to, I can just come up here to wiggle speed and I can turn this to 30 and I will turn the wiggle amount down to 10 and check this out. Now it is wiggling very violently like you see in all of the memes on the internet. So it's very simple for you guys to do this. Just drag a wiggle behavior onto your object that you want to shake, and then you can kind of increase this or decrease as you want. So the speed, if we ramp it up to 75 and then we ramp this up to like 50 something, it's just gonna kind of go wider and wider, and I can make this really crazy just by increasing that a lot, and you guys can play with this however much you want. Now, the only other thing that I want to show you guys is that menu item from before. Remember the menu item from before? If I turn on motion blur for this layer, guys, it will turn on motion blur for the composition at the same time. So instead of it being 2 clicks or me forgetting that I forgot to do that, it is 1 simple click, and that will throw the motion blur on in the composition as well. And now this ball that's been going crazy has a lot of crazy motion blur on it because it is so intense, and I can just turn that off right here if I wanted to. And now that we've reached the end of our video, it is time to export our composition. You can come up to File, Export, Add to Render Queue, or if you're smart like me, add a keyboard shortcut just like Premiere, it is Control-M. So if I hit Control-M on my keyboard, it will bring up the render queue, and now it is time for me to export this. And I want to export it as an animation layer with an alpha background, just like this, so I can actually throw it in something else and not have it be a black background. So how do I do that? A lot of the times you guys will see this and you're like, lossless, AVI, what is that? We're gonna make a preset right now that is airtight, rock solid. Check this out. Come down here to Output Module and go to Make Template, okay? And then we're gonna do 2 things. We're gonna name this ProRes 4444. And then what we're gonna do is set our movie default from lossless to ProRes 4444 so that anytime we export something, it is going to export with these settings in mind as long as it's a video. So now let's come down here to Edit. And we're gonna change some stuff. Format, we're gonna switch this to QuickTime. Post-render action, none. Format options, Apple ProRes 4444. Make sure that that is the one that you have selected. Click OK. And RGB plus alpha is what we're going to do. If it has an alpha layer and alpha channel, it will export that alpha channel along with the rest of the video. And now I'm just gonna click OK and click OK one more time. And if I were to delete this out of my render queue now, go back to my composition and now add it back to my render queue, it is automatically going to default to a ProRes 4444 output with alpha layer as well. And then we can just go to output 2, click on that name right there, and we are going to save it to wherever we want. Ball shake. Save, render. Nailed it. So now guys, if we open that file that we just saved, there it is right there. We have a ball that is just jiggling around, and you can't see it right now because I'm in preview, but this is actually an alpha layer. And I can prove that to you real quickly. For those of you that don't believe me, there it is, boom. So here's my ballshake.mov. I can tell that it's an alpha layer by toggling on this alpha selection tool. And there you go. Now I got 2 red balls that are just kind of jiggling around. Okay, this is getting weird. Oh, God, we just went through so many different things in After Effects. Some things that you probably had no idea about, some things that you may have known about. If you've just opened After Effects for the first time, you're probably just melted into your chair, not exactly knowing what just happened. But what just happened was we went through a bunch of different settings, menu settings, timeline settings, preview settings, all these different things to help speed up your After Effects experience, speed up your workflow, get the ideas from your head into the computer as fast and as easily as you possibly can. So at this point in the video, I would actually do a recap of everything that we learned today, but it was actually so much stuff that I couldn't possibly remember everything that we talked about. So what I would recommend doing is just going back in this video and watching through some sections again. If you want to learn or if you want to take a closer look at what I was doing, I will also include everything in the video description below for you to read if you don't want to watch again. But that about does it today for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully at the end of it, your After Effects experience will be smoother, faster, quicker. I'm just using adjectives of the same word. You get the point. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and also check out the last video that you missed. We do them here weekly at Learn How to Edit Stuff. If you have any ideas of videos that you'd like to see, you want me to teach you, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below. Subscribe, check out the last video, and I will see you next time.